Hi, my name is Lauren, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about scams that happen in South America. I began thinking about these sorts of things after watching a TV show. It was actually called The Real Hustle, and it talks about scams and stuff. So I started to think about all the stories that have basically happened to me during my own travels. Personally, I've traveled through a few countries in South America. I've been to Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Colombia, and I've lived in two of those countries. I've lived in Argentina and Colombia for about 1 year each time. So I've seen a lot of different things that occur to both travelers and residents alike. To read stories, true stories about my experiences with these things, you can read my blog post below. So go ahead and check that out if you're interested in hearing the full deal or stories about things that really happened to me. The first thing I want to talk about is something called shortchanging. Shortchanging is when a vendor forgets to give you all of your change back. This is something that's extremely common. It's happened to me so many times. If I pay for something small, like if I go to buy ice cream or a hot dog or anything like that, sometimes vendors, they just forget to give me all of their change back. What I do to counter this is I make sure that when I am buying something, I calculate the change ahead of time, and I count the change myself right in front of me without turning away or anything like that. If I realize that my change has been short, then I challenge the person right away. You don't even have to speak the local language. Even though I do speak Spanish, I've seen people, like my mother, for example, challenge a vendor right away in English, and they knew exactly what happened, and they usually just give you the rest of your change back. They'll say, "Oops, sorry me," and they'll just give it back. The second thing I want to talk about is something called pickpocketing. This is a crime that happens all around the world, and South America is definitely not an exception to this rule. I've personally been pickpocketed twice, and it's not a pleasant experience. It's a very quick crime. What I would do to combat that is don't keep your valuables in your outside pockets. Anything that's outside, even if it zips up, like your jacket pockets, your pants pockets, your jeans pockets, or anything. This is a really quick thing that happens, and thieves, they make an excuse to get close to you, and then somehow they just dig in your pockets, and then they're gone by the time you realize anything has happened. Okay, another tip for pickpocketing is if you're carrying a purse or a bag and you're in a crowded place like maybe a concert or a subway or a bus, you turn your book bag and keep it in front of you, or if you have a purse, you keep it close to you. It's about being able to see where your stuff is. Otherwise, it'll just feel like someone is bumping into you while they're picking out whatever they want. They're just helping themselves to your belongings. Another thing I wanted to talk about was purse snatching. This is for us women or maybe men who carry purses. This is when thieves just take your purse and cut and run. A lot of times when it happens is when you're not paying attention and you don't realize it until you go to pay for something or you reach for your purse. The way that I combat this is when I go to bars or restaurants, I never hang my purse on the back of my chair. And when I go to bars and restaurants, I also don't leave it on the table, especially if I'm outside. The reason why I don't do that is it gives an opportunity for a thief or a criminal to just take your purse and then cut and run. And you probably won't be able to catch them when it happens because it happens really fast, and who has time to get up and then chase after someone. Another thing that you can do is keep heavy-duty straps on your bag, like a bag that's maybe made of leather and has nice thick straps, the kind that you can't just cut through, because it happens sometimes where someone just cuts the straps of a bag that's made of cloth or something like that. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about are ATM problems. Sometimes if you use an ATM, something can go wrong. You might not get money, or you could even get robbed. Usually when an ATM doesn't work, it'll just spit your card out and possibly give you an error message, but other things can go wrong as well. If an ATM keeps your card or it takes money of your account but doesn't give you money, what you can do is go inside the bank and talk to the officials about what happened, and also call your home bank and tell them what happened. They might be able to give you money back from insurance. Another thing that can go wrong is robbery. So I try to watch the sort of ATMs that I go to. The first thing I do is I look for ATMs that are inside, individual, and have doors that lock. I think those are the best, but you may not be able to find something like that everywhere. So the next best thing is to use ATMs during business hours when there are staff around. That way it's a little bit safer. And I try to avoid using ATMs at night, especially if they are outside. I think that's the worst scenario that you can have. The next thing I want to talk about are taxis. There are a few things that can go wrong in taxis. One thing is if a taxi has a meter, the taxi driver could have a meter that runs a little bit too fast and overcharge you, or they can forget to run the meter at all and overcharge you when you arrive at your destination. To prevent that from happening, whenever you get into a taxi and it's supposed to have a meter, make sure that the taxi driver turns the meter on and observe the meter as you're riding in that taxi to make sure that it's not going up too quickly. Another thing that can go wrong in taxis are they have to do with taxis that don't have meters at all. In some countries or in some cities, it's more common for taxis to not have meters. In that case, make sure that you negotiate the price ahead of time before getting into the cab. One thing you can do is get familiar or ask locals how much a ride is supposed to cost before you even approach a taxi in the first place. But once you agree on that price, make sure the price is clear and remind them if they forget what the price is supposed to be. Another thing to combat against people overcharging you is to make sure you bring either exact change or only small bills, so that way taxi drivers can't pretend that they don't have change or refuse to give you change after you give them a large note. Another warning about taxis is make sure that you don't get into unmarked cars that claim to be taxis. It seems pretty obvious, but sometimes tourists do that and the consequences can be rather devastating. It's actually pretty dangerous, so just don't do that and get familiar with what taxis are supposed to look like, what the trusted companies are, what color their cars are supposed to be. Is it acceptable to let someone else ride with you? As a matter of fact, I wouldn't even let that happen, whether it's acceptable or not. The next thing I wanted to talk about are Good Samaritans. Beware of Good Samaritans. They are people who come up to help you. This may sound bad, but sometimes people are really just delinquents or they're criminals. Their real intention is to usually pickpocket you or get into your goods or valuables in some way, shape, or form. You have the famous mustard scam where people throw mustard on you and then they pretend to help you. What I would do is to remain alert, be aware of where your belongings are, and be suspicious of strangers being really eager to help you after an unlikely event like mustard falling on you magically or something like that. Also, if you're at an ATM, as a warning, don't let strangers that are not authorized to help you at an ATM. Those people may help you by threatening to rob you with a weapon or something like that, so that can just be plain dangerous. The next thing I wanted to talk about was accommodation. When you go to a new country, you're going to need a place to stay, whether it's short-term or long-term. If you're staying at a place short-term, you can just check out reviews of hotels or hostels or whatever to make sure that the place is good. I've always done that, and I've always put priority on good reviews, so I never had any major problems at places I've stayed at. But if you're going to stay someplace long-term and you're considering an apartment or a homestay or something, it's good to talk to the owner of the place of where you're staying to make sure that you either have a contract or it's very clear the amount of time that you're staying and how much money you'll be paying that person every month. This seems pretty simple, but I've been in situations where things were not as simple. Another thing you can try negotiating is a trial period, staying at a place for a month to make sure that it's good. Because sometimes owners make sure that everything is nice and clean when you visit, but when you actually stay there, it gets really disgusting, or it's poorly maintained, or you have terrible neighbors, etc. So you might want to say, oh, can I stay here for a month just to see if everything's nice and clean, and then I'll stay for maybe the rest of the year or something like that. People will be more inclined to agree with you as long as you make that arrangement ahead of time. Other things that you have to watch out for are just plain rip-offs. Rip-offs, rip-offs, rip-offs. You go to buy something and it turns out to be a piece of junk. Check out what you're buying ahead of time. Made a buyer beware. Make sure that you look at the item and inspect it well to make sure that it's not broken or doesn't have holes or it's otherwise non-operational. And don't be afraid to talk to people. Talk to locals and see where they buy things, who has a reputation for honesty or good quality items or services. So hopefully these little tips will help you out. Like I said before, if you would like to read stories about my personal experiences, you can check out the posts below in my blog. And if you have any questions about traveling, you can always just send them to me. You can either email me or you can just leave a comment on my blog and I'll get back to you. Bye-bye.